Active monitoring. It is important that testing personnel actively monitor all testing situations to maintain a high level of test security. Many procedural testing irregularities can be prevented through active monitoring. Active monitoring means moving about the testing area to ensure students do not have access to unallowable materials. Active monitoring means being engaged in and alert to student behavior. Active monitoring involves observing students during breaks from testing. Active monitoring ensures that results are meaningful and valid. Active monitoring involves moving about the testing area to observe students testing and discourage student cheating. Test administrators do not have to be moving about the testing area all the time. The amount of movement needed will depend on the characteristics of the testing environment and the number of students in a room. Remember that testing incidents can take place in a very short amount of time. Therefore, test administrators must remain alert throughout the entire test administration. Active monitoring can vary based on the testing scenario. Consider, for example, the following: an individual administration, a computer lab with 15 students testing, a class of 20 students, and 6 students in a small group administration. Which of these testing situations require less movement around the room on the part of the test administrator? A small group or individual administration will not require the same amount of movement from the test administrator that would be necessary in an administration with 15 or 20 students. Active monitoring requires more than simply moving about the classroom. When actively monitoring, test administrators must make sure that students only have access to materials allowable for the content area test being administered. For example, this may include calculators for some mathematics tests and dictionaries for reading language arts tests. Test administrators must ensure that students do not have access to unallowable materials like cell phones and testing strategies. Active monitoring can be successfully implemented even if a test administrator needs to engage in another test related activity, such as a brief check in with a hall monitor. Stay engaged in what students are doing while keeping all extraneous activities brief and relevant to the test administration. Please be aware that active monitoring also applies to testing breaks. During lunch and other breaks from testing, trained testing personnel must be with students to prevent them from talking about the content of the assessment or accessing unallowable materials. It is essential to stay involved and alert at all times while actively monitoring a test administration. Test administrators should not engage in activities that might interfere with their ability to actively monitor, such as browsing the internet, grading student work, or reading. However, please keep in mind that while actively monitoring, test administrators may have a device to communicate with their campus testing coordinator in case of an emergency. Remember that active monitoring means that test administrators are actively engaged in observing students' behavior at all times during the administration of state assessments. Active monitoring helps to avoid unexpected or invalid test results, nullification of students' tests, the loss of testing opportunities, possible breaches in test security, and accountability implications.